February 6, 2014, a team of elite cave divers arrived in Norway ready to plunge into Plora, a system so deep, dark, and merciless that few had dared tread its waters before. They didn't yet know this would become one of Norway's most harrowing caving disasters. What made it worse? One of them, Kai Konkien, 46, a veteran whose scars could fill a ledger, had lost his best friend and diving partner just 12 months prior. Yet, here he was again, back within weeks, preparing to descend into Europe's most lethal underwater labyrinth. He wasn't alone. 4 others joined him. Patrick Gronkfist, 42, Jari Huatarian, 40, Jari Uesamaki, 34, and Visa Renton, just 33, the youngest of them all, but no less seasoned under pressure. Their plan? Enter through the submerged opening at Plora's first entrance, drift downriver with the current, then exit via a second passage barely charted, discovered only recently. Ambitious, risky, doomed to be brutal, because this cave doesn't play nice. 130 meters below, in water so cold you could freeze before your lungs even filled it, demanded blind turns, tight squeezes, and a 5-hour descent under perfect conditions. Still left no room for error. They cut a triangular hole through frozen surface, cold enough to crack glass, sharp enough to make your breath hitch, and began their descent. But they didn't go all at once. Patrick and Jari Huatarian led first, using underwater scooters to conserve energy while visibility settled beneath sediment's weight. The other 3 followed 2 hours later. Smart move, sunlight barely reached beyond 5 meters inside, lose sight. You might not find your way back, or worse, drown before you could scream. And for the first 34 meters, it went smoothly. Narrow corridors passed, without incident until they found themselves in an air-filled chamber 250 meters long, warm enough to catch their breath and just wide enough to rest before facing what came next, a steep drop into darkness. For a moment, it felt like this could be easy. Too easy. Then the turn came. Not gentle, a narrow passage barely allowing a fully geared diver to squeeze through. Patrick went first. He hadn't gone more than 3 feet when Jari Huatarian's flashlight began flashing erratically and then died completely. Patrick turned back instantly, heart pounding harder than his own pulse in silence. He saw his friend pinned against a rock face, one bailout cylinder caught tight between stone and ice. Panic had already taken hold, and under these conditions, that meant certain death. He couldn't scream. Not when the cave swallowed every sound like an old man swallowing his coughs. Patrick had to stay calm or become the next victim himself. He checked his dive computer. 400 minutes now. 9 hours submerged. Decompression sickness would claim him if he didn't get out soon. He turned away from Yari's body, swam toward the second exit, and began moving through darkness alone. Behind him, the other 3 were still following their schedule, 2 hours behind Patrick and Jari, but they hadn't noticed anything was wrong yet. Bassa heard a faint distress signal echoing down the tunnel as he descended into the deepest section. He followed it. Instinctively, Kai found Yari's body blocking the path ahead. The cold shock hit him harder than ice ever could. His hands trembled, but he forced himself forward. There was no turning back now, not if they wanted to survive long enough for their oxygen tanks to last 12 hours underwater. Yuryu came next, then Vesa Renton, and both saw Yari's corpse just as clearly as Besa had. But unlike Besa, who tried to hold his composure, Vesa panicked instantly. His breathing became erratic. His limbs locked up like overheating machinery. Kai rushed over to calm him, but it was too late. Panic underwater doesn't wait for warnings. It kills in minutes. Within seconds, Jari Uesamaki's life slipped away, not from lack of air or gear failure, but from sheer terror. Kai rushed back toward Vesa, trying to reason with him. Just turn back, we can get out. So Kai made a decision. Alone, he swam back through the tunnel, leaving his team behind in the dark. When he emerged from the first entrance, it was barely 1:30 a.m. He dragged himself into their van, the same vehicle that had brought them here, and waited for Patrick or Vesa to come out alive. They didn't disappoint him. At 2 a.m., both reached safety, marking an ending that felt less like victory and more like a miracle. But Plora's horror wasn't over yet. Only 4 years later, in September 2018, another team descended into the world's deepest cave, very off-canon, a place fewer people had ever stood than visited space. Led by Pavel Demidov, they returned for their second attempt, having already reached the bottom months before. 2 new faces joined them. British photographer Robbie Schoen and his assistant Jeff Wade. Their mission? To capture the cave's surreal beauty and collect samples of shrimp and scorpions that might survive without sunlight. They had to lower themselves 32 meters down a vertical shaft before entering the labyrinth beneath. Once inside, no shortcuts. Thousands of meters of twisting tunnels, mud-slick walls, and passages so narrow you could barely fit your elbow through without breaking skin. They set up 6 underground camps along their route, each serving as rest stops and mental reset points. 8 hours just to reach the first camp, 6 days to get halfway down. But on day 7, everything changed. Roman and Natalia had left early that morning for a flight, but returned too late. A deafening roar split open the cave's ceiling. Water crashed in without warning and flooded their base within minutes. They called the rest of the team through cable lines installed earlier, but no one listened properly. After hours of fighting current, he finally reached a dry section where water had diverted into another path. There was an anchor point, and for the first time since entering this nightmare, he could rest, breathe. Just minutes later, Jeff Wade appeared beside him, having followed silently behind all along. They were safe for now, but they still didn't know if Pavel's crew made it out alive. The water kept rising. If they waited too long, the entire tunnel would be underwater again. So Robbie and Jeff climbed higher, with each step feeling heavier than the last. After a grueling ascent, they reached camp at 1,900 meters deep and saw headlamps flicker in the distance. 5 Russian divers emerged from darkness, barely alive, but still breathing. They didn't celebrate yet, not until after 20 hours trapped underground, when they finally noticed water began to recede. Then it was time to climb again, with 4 more days of walking and climbing under freezing conditions before reaching sunlight once more. They'd survived, but barely. In 2001, he started posting blogs detailing his adventures with a mysterious cave. His first entry, March 23rd, "We went deep into a remote chamber and found something strange." He described crawling through tight passages to reach a narrow hole just inches wide, where wind howled constantly from beyond an unexplored chamber waiting to be discovered. But then things got weird. The howling grew louder. Now it was accompanied by deep rumbling, the kind you hear from trucks passing along mountain highways. Except this cave had no roads nearby, and when Ted and his friend B brought in their dog, a loyal companion who'd explored caves before, to test the tunnel beyond, something went wrong immediately. That night, while drilling near the opening, Ted heard another sound, something grinding deep within the cave walls. He told himself it was just echo from the drill, but deep down he knew better. On March 3rd, a scream echoed through the tunnel, a terrible one, described by Ted as the most horrifying noise I've ever heard. He sealed the hole with rocks and sat in silence for hours, only to return later when no threat appeared. Ted squeezed through. It was tight, arms pinned against his sides, but he pushed forward anyway. What he found on the other side stunned him. A surprisingly large chamber with a round stone leaning against the wall, and carved into the rock, hieroglyphs depicting figures around some kind of symbol. They returned again with Joe, a friend who could help interpret these strange markings. But disaster struck during their 3rd trip. Ted slammed his head on the cave wall and got concussed. Joe was left alone to explore the chamber. He didn't come out until much later, and when he did, pale and shaking with fear, he said only one thing: "I don't feel good." After that, he never spoke again. Ted and B returned once more with proper gear, a 2-way cable phone, a camcorder. Ted went in alone. He found the stone again, but this time something moved it. It rolled over the cable wire, cutting off their connection, and then something crawled behind him. He didn't look back, just ran for his life. The stench hit him before he even made it through the tunnel, an oily, wet smell that clung to your skin like death itself. When he popped out of the hole gasping, he heard scraping again coming from inside the chamber. He sprinted toward B, who was already climbing up the rope. They reached the top just in time together, and without hesitation, B cut the rope with his knife, letting it fall back into darkness. That wasn't the end of Ted's story. A few weeks later, he posted one final blog for my family and friends: "Be at peace. I will conquer this cave. Then I'll return with photos, videos, and answers." And that was his last message ever on the internet. His tale spread like wildfire across the web. Some believed Ted had been taken by a demon lurking in the depths. Others claimed the stone behind him opened into another world. But none of those theories were true. When YouTube channel Nick Boddick interviewed Ted himself, most of it turned out to be fake. He explored a cave that whispered secrets, but were they real? Or just the mind playing tricks in the dark? The supernatural, just crafted words. Chilling tales meant to keep readers awake long after lights out. It's not just fear, it is the power of storytelling, designed to linger in your mind long after you've closed the page. Truth may be subjective, but this story, it's carved into memory, unforgettable, haunting, timeless.